The number of Filipino households facing involuntary hunger surged to 26%, the highest level since the COVID-19 pandemic. The latest Social Weather Station survey for December reveals at least 1 in 4 Filipino families experienced hunger and lack of food at least once in the past 3 months. This marks a 3-point increase from the 23% reported in the previous quarter. The full year 2024 hunger average hit 20%, nearly double the 2023 figure and just below the record highs seen in 2020. The non-commissioned fourth quarter 2024 Social Weather Station survey interviewed 2,160 adults across the country. Well, this alarming trend on self-rated hunger underscores the pressing challenges of food insecurity and economic disparity in the Philippines. To delve deeper into this issue, we are joined by Sonny Africa, Executive Director of IBON Foundation, a prominent research and advocacy organization dedicated to economic and social development. Good morning, Sonny, and good to see you again.
Hi, good morning, Ms. Ray. Happy New Year to everyone. Thanks for the invitation.
Happy New Year and welcome to Follow the Money. The latest SWS survey, of course, reveals that self-rated hunger among Filipino families has reached 25.9% as of last month, the highest in over 2 decades. Is that correct? What do you identify as the likely primary factors contributing to this alarming increase?
Well, clearly, fundamentally, there's not enough decent work. Despite supposedly improving unemployment figures, and despite claims that we have a robust, quote-unquote, robust labor market, clearly people are not earning enough from what work they can find to survive in the context of, despite moderating inflation, rising prices. But I think what's another thing important to highlight, it's especially alarming to have that huge uptick in not just hunger, but also poverty, because 2024 actually saw an increase in the aid programs of the government. So clearly something fishy is happening here, not just on the joblessness side, but also in terms of how or why so much billions of pesos in ayuda is not even averting of that decline.
Could you give us a hint on what you think that something fishy might be?
Okay. A lot of the uptick in ayuda in 2024 actually went, for instance, to the ACA program. Unlike the 4-piece program, I'm sure it's well known by now, the 4-piece program spends quite a lot on administrative costs to make sure that the beneficiaries are identified and receive the funding. ACAP did not have that same kind of system. So it actually does raise doubts right now. In terms of the Philippines political context, a lot of leakages, quote unquote, are happening to actually get that, I think, 28 billion increase in ACAP funds in 2024. That might explain why the ayuda not just is not enough for so many people in need because of joblessness, but maybe even the ayuda being assigned is not even going to those who need it at all.
So it could be the distribution system that we're finding leakages in. What about, do you think it might also be, instead of giving men the fish, why don't you teach them how to fish? Is it a matter of that as well?
No, definitely. I mean, in the hierarchy of problems, the core problem, fundamental problem is joblessness, which I think the government should ask why are there not enough jobs in the Philippines. The ayuda will, emergency cash assistance, that's always going to be emergency assistance. It's to mitigate poverty, not eradicate poverty. The only way to eradicate poverty is to decent work for everyone, which for some strange reason, this government and past governments have not realized can only happen through supporting domestic agriculture, supporting Filipino industry. I don't think very many people know agriculture right now has fallen to its smallest share of the economy in its history. It's less than 8% as of the first 3 quarters of the year. Manufacturing, again, I don't think very many people know this, it's fallen to the smallest since 1949. It's at less than 18% now. The only time it was lower was at 16% in 1949, the post-war years. And unless the government really cuts to the heart of the matter. There's clearly failed economic policies that have led agriculture and industry to decline. That's where joblessness is coming from. That's where the lack of decent work is coming from. And that's where ayuda will never be enough because there's so many needy people right now. Ayuda will never be enough. It's just fiscally impossible to help all those in need with a cash dole.
We were just speaking with the labor secretary, and actually, joblessness has actually improved over the past few quarters, supposedly. So, where is the gap coming from? Plus,
Yeah.
there's this growing concern that instead of going to food, budgets of the family are going into betting, online gaming, other forms of gambling, and that's straining the food budget, particularly among low-income households. How do you see this issue affecting the crisis, the poverty crisis, hunger crisis, and what measures might be suggested to address it?
Yeah, I'll go to the bigger, more important question. All these claims about having a robust labor market, I think we should interrogate the figures more. The government should interrogate the figures more. Did you know between November this year, the latest, sorry, November 2024 and November the previous year, actually reported number of employed actually fell. I mean, it's statistically insignificant, but it fell by about 100,000. But I think more importantly, the question is, even if there are reported to be 49 million Filipinos employed, the bigger question is why are the poor still increasing? And the disconnect is because you'll notice when the labor force figures are presented, there's never any report about how much people are earning. If anything, employment figures are bloated by so many millions of unpaid family workers. As I recall, there's maybe about 3.3, 3.4 million people reported as employed, but they're unpaid. So add those, discount that employment, take out those who are unpaid family workers, about 3.2, 3.3 million. But key question to ask, even among all those who are getting paid, how much are they earning? And what the poverty figures are saying, they're not earning enough. So I think we really have to be very wary about any claims that we have a robust labor market because a lot of jobs now aren't paying enough. Also, a lot of jobless Filipinos aren't even being counted in the unemployment figures because they were considered dropping out of the labor force. If you're jobless and you stop looking for work because there's no work to be found, you're not considered jobless even if you're jobless. So I think the numbers should be taken at face value. I'm pretty sure the government knows that they should be taken at face value, but I think this tendency to sort of cover up things with the selective use of statistics, I think that cuts to the heart of the problem. If you don't accept the problem, we're not going to take the difficult steps needed to fix that problem. And it's a huge problem. Worsening hunger, worsening poverty. The government has admitted worsening joblessness and informality. If they don't, head on admit that's the problem, stop claiming we have a strong economy, stop claiming we have a robust labor market, stop claiming that we will be saved by the same policies that have failed over the last 4 decades. I mean, we need a bit more imagination, rethinking of where we are.
Well, we'll touch back on the online gambling in a
All
moment,
right.
but we do want to probe that a little further. The answer can't be in raising the wages of workers right now because even as we speak, employers are already bucking that particular proposal.
Mhm.
Plus, the wages in the Philippines are not the cheapest in Asia. They're said to be higher than most of Southeast Asia, which is why a lot of factories are moving outside of the Philippines and outside of China even, not just because of the skills gap, but also because of how pricey our wages have become.
Okay. I think even before talking about the wages, there's a more basic problem. If we are not giving enough support to domestic agriculture and Filipino industry, we're not going to create any wage work to begin with. So even before talking about wages, we have to increase the number of wage work. And I remember your previous news item, it talked about industrial policy. I think for some reason, this government seems to oblivious to how, since 2008, 2009, especially since COVID, even the most advanced industrial powers in the world, in the United States, Europe, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, they are becoming protectionist. If even the most advanced industrial powers feel the need to protect their industries, to keep their economies genuinely strong, to keep jobs in their countries, it's a bit weird that the logical conclusion, the Philippines, which is not industrialized, is opening up. So I think that's a core notion I think that the Philippine government has to embrace. We will never create enough jobs, especially decent jobs for Filipinos, unless we embrace the need for Philippine industrialization. And I think that lack of imagination, this sort of being trapped in this notion that, no, no, let's leave the free market to sort things out, that's not going to happen anymore. And even this idea of relying on foreign markets and foreign capital, exactly, in a more protectionist world, that's telling us we should rely on external forces to develop us. We should develop on domestic based on domestic-led strategies, which are more money for agriculture, more money for industry, more protection for domestic agriculture industry, build the capacity so we don't rely on foreign markets or foreign capital, or most of all, we don't rely on foreign jobs. And I think it is not that a bit of bolder thinking and rethinking among our political leaders, actually even among our private leaders, without that sort of bolder reimagined vision for the country, we're not going to solve this super sticky problem of worsening poverty, worsening hunger.
Do you think this joblessness has actually resulted in more consumption of online betting and that kind of addiction?
Uh, no doubt. I mean, especially since COVID, when it became so much easier for people to pin their hopes on, a few thumb swipes, online bingo or online sabong and all that. Definitely, I think because Filipinos are so desperate for quick earnings because it's not to be had from proper work, they are being pushed towards gambling. And I think it is a vice. I think it is a drain on people's resources. But I'd rather view it from where people are coming from. Not everyone. I think that a lot of rich gamble, the ones who go to Soler and all these huge casinos. I mean, they can do what they want with their money. But in all honesty, I do think so many Filipinos are pushed into gambling because they don't know where else to go to sort of bump up their incomes. And setting aside the momentary euphoria, enjoyment, or how they're manipulated by AI to keep on gambling, I want to start from where they are. They're starting from a need for more incomes. Most online gamblers right now, if you talk about the numbers, they're there because they need more money. Why do I say that? Because exactly like the report of SWS said, right now, over 6 out of 10 Filipino families are poor. I think a lot of them do think gambling might be a way to sort of bump up their incomes. But also want to add, it's not just SWS that reported worsening poverty. Even the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, unfortunately the only other agency providing statistics that might be relevant, in the fourth quarter of 2024, the Bangko Sentral found that an amazing 7 out of 10, actually no, 3 out of 4 Filipino households didn't have any savings. That's awesome. That's a huge amount. That's 20.1 million Filipino households not having any savings. So I think, if you start from that appreciation of where Filipinos are coming from, they need work, they need incomes, prices, yeah, inflation is moderating, but it's still too much for their earnings. I think that is pushing at least a portion of them, perhaps we might say irrationally, but they're compelled to look for other sources of income. And I think gambling, unfortunately, with all these online platforms, has become more convenient.
All right, Sonny, we're down to our last few seconds, but and we've already talked about some policy recommendations that you've made considering the hunger incidents. Is there one policy that you'd like to see return or be implemented at this point in time, especially as we talk about budgets and ahead of the midterm elections?
Beyond ayuda, take it out of politicians' hands, give it to those in need because they do need it. But the only solution, we have to adopt a policy of Filipino industrialization. If industrialized countries are protecting their own industries, a backward Filipino industry should be protected even more. Without that, we won't solve joblessness, we won't solve the lack of decent work, we won't solve poverty and hunger. An industrialization strategy that builds Filipino industries, I think is the most important thing.
On that note, Sonny Africa, Executive Director of IBON Foundation, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. As you've highlighted, addressing the root causes of hunger and economic disparity requires comprehensive policy reforms and a commitment to equitable development. Thank you so much.
Thank you.